It's great to be here. I've got the privilege of spending a little time yesterday with Bobby and Sue Mitchell and heard a lot even more about FCCI than I knew beforehand. And I just want to start out by thanking you guys. I do a lot of blood, sweat, and tears fighting for religious freedom, but it doesn't do much good if nobody's doing anything with it. And I think of how many people who are, who would say they love the Lord, that have businesses but are never intentional about using their businesses to affect the world for Christ. And so you guys are doing that, and so thank you. It reminds me, I did this morning services at Charles Stanley's church a number of years ago, and after that he was just really had a heart for First Liberty and what we were doing, and he sent a gift. And I called him to thank him, and I said, Dr. Stanley, I just want you to know that the only reason I do what I do is so you can do what you do. And he said, I understand that, so you keep doing what you're doing because I plan to keep doing what I'm doing. And so that's why I'm here today. I want to equip you to do what you're doing and to make a difference for Christ. So I want to start with something, I don't know how many of you realize this, but we've had an unbelievable year. Those who I know are already on our list probably know about these things. We had already won a record number of cases, and then we won 2 cases at the Supreme Court within 6 days, which is, it's not normal, okay? There's 8,000 requests a year to take your case at the Supreme Court. They took 67 last year. That's normal, 65, 67, out of 8,000, right? The idea that they would take any of your cases, much less 2 of your cases, but then that not only they take your case, but you win 2 cases, and it's within 6 days of each other. That's only a God thing. And I'm telling you, God is moving in dramatic ways, and I'm going to run through that and try to give you a feel for what's going on. Let me step back and start with the basics. What's First Liberty? First Liberty is the largest legal nonprofit in the country that all we do is religious freedom. So let's say you're Gabriela Perez, not too far from here. You're a 5-year-old girl. Lives outside of Orlando, and you're caught praying over your meal. And, you're a poor family, don't have any ability. What are you going to do? Go out and pull a couple $100,000 out and hire attorneys? No. So we bring in the best litigators in the country who donate their time so that when Gabriela wins her case, which she did, we don't just win for Gabriela, but we set a precedent that protects all of our kids and our grandkids. And that's a quick summary of how we do and what we do. How did I get involved in this? Back when I was in high school, I realized my gifts were in analytical thinking and speaking, and I thought, well, I either need to be a pastor or a lawyer. And people said, well, that's like a God or Satan choice, isn't it, to be a pastor or a lawyer? And I realized, I analyzed my DNA, and I thought, I'd probably do better at dispensing justice rather than mercy, so I'd probably make a better lawyer than pastor. And went to law school and really should have finished middle of my class with my intelligence and all that stuff, but I had a heart for ministry. So I went and spent a lot of time. I led the discipleship ministry at my church for the college students. This is a really bad plan. If in a law school, you're average in your class as far as intelligence, and then you spend all this time doing something else when everybody else is doing 24/7. But when the grades came back, I was making all the high grades, and it was God's way to show me, I want you to keep your heart for ministry, but I want you to do law. And so I got out, I clerked for a federal judge. It's a 1-year thing to do, and you get to sort of help the judge research and write opinions. You get to see what it's like to be on the other side of the bench. And after that, the law firms all want you because that's just a unique perspective. So I had all these offers from the law firms, and I just felt like I would suffocate if I went and did that. I just didn't feel like that's what God was wanting me to do. So I remember thinking, sitting in my little clerk's office thinking, what do you want to do? I thought, I want to use my legal skills because God's shown me that, but I want to help pastors and churches and religious freedoms and our founding principles, and I'd even like to go to seminary. And I laughed because there was no job to pay you to do any such thing. And 2 weeks later, 2 partners in major national law firms, never met either one of these guys, called me and said, will you go to lunch? And I said, sure. And at lunch they said, look, we started donating our time for religious freedom. We're getting so many calls, it's hurting our ability to make a living. So we were wondering, would you be willing to do legal cases, help pastors, churches, religious freedoms, and our founding principles, and you can even go to seminary part-time? Now, being in my mid-20s, maybe a little immature in my faith, I said, let me pray about it, like that wasn't the answer to prayer. And the next day I said, I think that was the answer to prayer, and they were like, how much you need to live on? And I was making $28,000 as a federal clerk, and These guys pitched in out of their pocket, and we started a nonprofit. And 33 years later, First Liberty is now the largest legal organization in the country that all we do is religious freedom. So it's just one of those God stories of God creating something that he knew needed to be created that would have to have time to grow to get to where we are now. And so one of the things I like to do when we start talking about what's going on is just a basic thing, but people take for granted, which is, is this important to you? Or should it be? You know, people who aren't Christians, is it important to them? The answer is yes. Our founders called this our first freedom because they understood if you lose this freedom, you'll lose all your freedoms. And you know, we have lots of people. I have people come up to me from, you name the country, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, et cetera. They say, look, I saw this happen in my country. They took down their religious symbols, and 2 months later, we all lost our political freedoms. I'm thinking of a guy in particular, handed me a check for $5,000 and said, I'm not a person of faith, but we're going to be supporting you from now on. And every few months, Peter sends in a check because he wants his freedoms, and he understands the connection, even though it's not about him. Christians tend to think, very small view, well, yeah, I want religious freedom because I want the ability to do what I want to do. It's so much bigger than that. And I don't know how to describe it, but as Marxism begins to sort of push in on the country, I think more and more people begin to realize. There's a great book out, if you haven't read, called Live Not by Lies by Rod Dreher. And what he does is he goes and interviews people from communist countries and talks about what happened, how does this happen, how do you overcome this? And what you see in every country is the first thing that happens when this Marxism comes in is it has to remove the church. It has to remove this authority of truth before it can do what it's going to do. And so the best way I can describe why this is, and what I'll tell you what the book says real quick, which is, well, what do you do about it? Live not by lies. Alexander Solzhenitsyn's last essay before he was banned from Russia, or the Soviet Union at the time, was, look, all totalitarian regimes exist by people being forced to go along with the lies. But if enough people, not a majority, just enough people will stand and speak the truth, even if they suffer, it collapses. And it tells the story of each country of how this happened. Now, guess who these people are who tend to stand and speak the truth, even if it costs them? They're believers. And so this is sort of the battle of our time. I mean, how many people know that there's a difference between a man and a woman in America? How many people are willing to stand up and say they know the difference? That's the key, okay? So how many people are going to be forced to go along with the lies? So this is the battle in our time, I think. But the best way I can describe why this works the way it does is, why even if you're an atheist, you should fight for religious freedom, is the one thing that a totalitarian regime will never allow are citizens who hold an allegiance to one higher than the government. And so when you see that kind of regime come in, the flashpoint is always going to be religious freedom. And if you lose there, you're going to lose everything. And so that being the case, how are we doing in America? Well, it probably doesn't surprise you. We're in a war. 2 years ago, we had 331 legal matters. Last year, we had 898. And the attacks are growing every year. And so, you know, I don't have to go. I could give you endless cases. I just want to give you some feel for this. Attacks on churches and synagogues. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had another case, Awaken Church. This is a church that was trying to figure out to get a facility so that they could hold their Christmas pageant. And so they went through months of negotiations with the symphony there in the city. And they said, yeah, this is working out great. This will be perfect. You can have it for a week. We'd love for you to do that. And then at the very end of the negotiations, they said, whoa, wait, you're a church? Are you a church? And they said, yeah, we're a church. They said, oh, we don't rent to churches. We don't do religious rentals. We don't have any policies on that. And so the church called us. I appreciate the pastor. He's a bold guy who's willing to take the gospel everywhere and is not certainly going to let Satan shut things down. And he reached out and we said, this is illegal. He said, I thought it was. I just wanted to make sure. We said, yeah, it violates federal law, it violates state law. So we got that letter together, sent it over to them after all the research, and let's just say they're having their week of the Christmas pageant this year in the Symphony Hall, okay, because they had to stand up. But we're having to, these are like daily things that people are having to do, fight over. Think of COVID. What happened when all these mayors, governors, politicians who had never had this kind of power before had this power. What was the flashpoint as far as the Constitution? It was the churches and the synagogues being shut down. You know, the liquor stores open, the gambling parlors open, the Home Depot's open, everything's open. But the one place it's really dangerous to be with COVID is an hour in your church. Okay, this is nonsense. Okay, but it shows you what I'm talking about when you have this type of power comes in and where the flashpoint is. And we knew this was going to be really hard. I mean, there's no precedent in our country on religious freedom during a pandemic. There's no cases. We knew you go into court, and on one side you've got a governor who says, I'm trying to save 20 million people's lives. And on the other side, you've got a pastor that says, hey, we just want to open for an hour on Sunday. I mean, that's a tough argument with a judge there who's wanting to not risk hurting anybody, right? So we prayed and prayed and waited and waited. Had hundreds and hundreds of people saying, you got to help us, you got to help us. And finally, a little over 2 years ago, we got a call from On Fire Christian Church. This is a church that wanted to come together for Easter, but wanted to be safe. And they came up with the idea is, we'll just drive in our cars in the church parking lot. And the pastor will speak over a radio frequency and into the cars. And I'm no CDC expert. Of course, I don't know that the CDC is much an expert anymore either. But I'm pretty sure you don't pass the coronavirus from one automobile to another. Yet, they were told that they would be criminally prosecuted if they drove their cars in the church parking lot. Then the governor announced statewide that they were going to send police officers that Easter Sunday to every church in the state, and any church parking lots that had cars in them, they were going to write down the license plate, and you would be visited at your home and quarantined for 14 days. We said, okay, this is China. This is the case, right? And so on Good Friday, we filed in federal district court for an immediate injunction. And we got a good federal judge, and remember what was happening now, the visuals we were getting at this time. It was the guy coming off the beach with a surfboard all by himself being handcuffed, arrested. The guy throwing a baseball in the park with his son being handcuffed in front of his son because he was in a park. People were wondering, has the Constitution been suspended? And this was the test case. This is the first one ever in the history of our country. And the judge looked at this and he said, I feel like this is some sort of dystopian novel. I mean, they're criminalizing an Easter gathering, in the United States of America in one of our cities. And he said, this is irrational, it's unreasonable, it's unconstitutional, and this will never happen as long as I'm a federal judge in the United States of America. And he began to write a 20-page opinion talking about how our country was built on religious freedom. Great opinion if you ever want to go read it. On Fire Christian Church. Just pull it up online. But our goal wasn't to just get people into their church parking lot. So our next church was Tabernacle Baptist Church. This was a church in a rural area, almost no COVID cases in the area, big facility, lots of room, could do plenty of social distancing. But again, you could go to the Home Depot and you could rub up against whoever you wanted, but the one thing you couldn't do is socially distance at your church. Okay, so it made no sense. It was clearly unconstitutional. So we filed a lawsuit, and by the time we were done with the lawsuit, the African-American Attorney General of the state, Daniel Cameron, joined us, suing his own governor on behalf of all the other churches and synagogues, and we ended up with a statewide injunction protecting every church, every synagogue, every house of worship, and their right to open on the same terms as every other business in the state. And we even had in D.C., Capitol Hill Baptist Church. They just wanted to meet outside, okay? Outside, socially distanced, with masks on, but they were told that would be illegal. They would be prosecuted, okay? If they had 101 people outside meeting for worship, because they weren't allowed to meet inside, that was a criminal violation. Meanwhile, the mayor and everybody else had said it's totally fine to have 5,000 people marching without masks during the BLM protests and everything else. So again, no sense. We won, injunction against them. They decided maybe they didn't want to appeal. So the problem is we won every single case during COVID all over the country. But nothing reached the Supreme Court in a merits fashion. So we literally are still in a fight in this country right now with no precedent at the highest level over whether the government can take over our churches and synagogues. Just a few weeks ago, we had a case that we just won called Chabad on the Beaches. This is a facility that sat for sale, publicly for sale, for 2.5 years. Nobody wanted it until the Jewish group brought it. And then the city decided, oh, we want that now. We're going to take it from you by eminent domain and kick you out. Well, after a federal judge opinion 2 weeks ago, they will be doing no such thing. But these are the kind of attacks that we're seeing. We got synagogue cases all across the country, Orthodox Jewish schools that are under attack. It's stuff that we didn't used to have to deal with, right? It's happening if you're a kid in our schools, or you're a teacher, or you're a coach. I'm going to talk about Coach Kennedy in a little bit, big case, but I mean, I could give you lots of valedictorian cases. Elizabeth Turner, we've got that one. She was valedictorian. She won the right to give the personal farewell. That's what valedictory address means, personal farewell. And she was going to, give her speech, but they told her, well, you can't say what you're going to say in your speech. What do you mean I can't say? What can I say? Was she cursing or whatever? No, she can't talk about God. I mean, this is about their personal farewell, what they think is important. How many of us have been to a valedictory address about some political or view or whatever? People are allowed to do that, but the one thing you're not allowed to do, supposedly, is talk about Jesus. And that she was like, this is the most important thing. This is what I've earned the right. This is what I'm going to talk about. Well, she's a valedictorian, so she's not dumb. So when they told her she couldn't do it, she said, I don't think that's right. And she reached out to us, and again, once we got involved, because they were just going to have just a regular graduation like everybody else. It actually ended up reaching a lot more people because it was carried on Fox News and a bunch of other things. So she reached a lot more people than she was intending to. But this happens every year. Kids in schools just trying to live their faith under attack. It's happening with these woke corporations attacking people. And you're seeing these examples all over the country with people who are being threatened at their workplace because they won't bend their Christian beliefs to the new woke ideology. And probably a great example of this is the Alaska Airlines case. And that is, I don't know if you've heard of it, there's an act called the Equality Act, which is a federal legislation that would literally go into all the federal laws, and whenever there's an LGBT issue, it strips religious freedom protection away. And, well, Alaska Airlines thought this was a great idea. So they sent out an email to everybody and said, hey, we want everybody to get behind this legislation. We think this is great. And then they said, we would love your feedback. And so some of the flight attendants thought they were being truthful. And so they said, Marley and Lacey in particular, who are our clients, they just said, I've got real problems with this legislation. This would take away religious freedoms, even from my church. So what did they do? They fired them. So they said, we want your feedback, but if it's Christian feedback, you're fired. Well, you can't do that in the United States, okay? We have federal laws about that. And so our goal in this case when we're done, oh, by the way, one of the things I love is the former head attorney for the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, Sharon Gustafson, saw this case, called us and said, can I be on this case with you guys? Because I'd like to take this to the EEOC and go after them. And we said, come on. So she's on our case as well. Well, we're now in district court, or about to be in district court, starting this case. And our goal is not just to win for Marley and Lacey, which we will win for Marley and Lacey. Our goal is to leave a mark on Alaska Airlines, so that it sends a message to everybody else. You don't do this to people in the United States. These are federal laws against this. So we're having to fight that. We're having to fight in the military. We had to create a whole division just for the military. Religious freedom in the military. And probably the most well-known case right now is the Navy SEALs case. I think this is probably the biggest case in the country for a lot of reasons. But this is, and by the way, it doesn't matter what your views are on the vaccine and whether people should take the vaccine or not. This is about the law, which says if you're in the military and you're asked to do something or told to do something that violates your faith, you have a right to ask for a religious accommodation. And it is the duty of the military to grant you that unless they go through a process which shows that there's no way they can do that. We value religious freedom as a country. And so these are SEALs 35 Navy SEALs, over 350 years of combat service, and for just asking for their what they have a federal right, they were all attacked and punished. One of them was on his way to his PTSD appointment, and they literally called the doctor and said, "Don't see him." We had others, they've taken their pensions away. They have taken their medical for their disabled children. And this is not just the SEAL. This is happening across the military. It's happening in every branch. Over 50,000 families now are in the process of being thrown out of the military in violation of law. And you know, I was just with General Boykin, who is an American hero. Jerry Boykin was head of Delta Force, head of the Green Beret. And he said, "Kelly, this is really horrible what's going on." He said, most of these families are 4th, 5th generation that go into the military. And he said, you know what they're doing now? They're saying to their kids, don't go. We can't tell you what they're going to force you to do. You can't trust them. And sure enough, I don't know if you saw the Army recruitment levels, but there's a certain level where you have to recruit to stay even. They hit 40% this year of their recruitment levels. And Boykin looked at me, this is a tough guy, tears in his eyes, and said, your SEALs case might save our military. What's going on here is horrible. The good news is we have won every step of the way. We were in federal court. We brought the evidence out, showed that their process was a sham. They were granting administrative exemptions on the vaccine. They were granting all kinds of exemptions, but no religious exemptions being denied. Nobody was going through the process. An Inspector General report was leaked just 2 weeks ago where internally they said what we're doing is a violation of federal law. We've won an injunction in federal court. The judge was so moved by what was happening that he converted it not beyond the Navy SEALs into a class action where we now have protected every single person in the Navy. There's now another lawsuit that has every single person protected in the Air Force, another that protects everybody in the Marines. So this is a real battle. We're up at the Court of Appeals, but it's crucial for the future of our military. And so anyway, be praying about these cases, watching these cases, but these are the kind of battles. And even attacks, you know, military, schools, churches, synagogues, you know, going on, even on the ability to share the gospel in the United States. We're having to fight for stuff we didn't used to. And so I want to show you a quick video. It's just an inspiration in certain ways, but it shows you the battles we're in. This is Gail Blair, who slowly was going blind. And then,
it was my
well, here,
identity.
I'll tell you about it in a minute.
I did everything. If I could help them get a job or an apartment, my husband says that I am a frustrated social worker. January 7th, 1984, I actually had been going to a Bible study on the book of John, and it opened my heart to the Word of God being the answer, the truth. It was the best day of my life. I actually was born with a genetic disorder, retinitis pigmentosa, and I still continued nursing until I couldn't anymore because of my vision loss. If somebody ever said to me, hey, you could have your eyesight, but you have to, you know, get rid of Jesus, I'd say, no, no deal. Wherever I go, I try to hand this out to people. So it's 21 chapters of the gospel. I get around with my cane to cross the street, to go in the park. Going into a park to talk with people is a pleasure, first of all, but knowing that eternal life is real and people don't know that they're in danger, people have been saved in the park. I've had more of a reaction from the staff in the park that was not too nice, like they would interrupt me. There's plenty of people to talk to. I don't have to be going after anybody. I couldn't. It would be a tripping hazard for me. I was sitting on a bench with a man that I was conversing with. The executive director comes over and he says that he was going to call the police, and that's the start of the 2-year ban, even from the library, which that was a little bit of a surprise to me, that they would ban me from both the park and the library on passing out one of the 66 books of the Bible that you have in your library that people can check out. I guess my heart is broken that I can't do what the Lord has told me to do. So if you want to say that I think about daily the lost souls, I think the Lord has positioned me right across from the park. It's a divine assignment that I absolutely need to fulfill. It's just a must.
Now, some of you are going, boy, I'm really glad FCCI invited that depressing speaker, the Shackelford guy, to our conference. So, let me tell you the good news. The good news is we have a method of dealing with all these attacks, and it's working. And that is, if you were to look at the nonprofit world and how, I don't care if they're left-wing or right-wing, the nonprofit legal groups, they have the same model. Raise as much money as you can raise. Put those, use that to hire as many attorneys as you can. Put them in an office in D.C. or L.A. or New York, and then fly them around the country and cover as many of your cases as you can cover. That's not our model. Our model is there's all these believers who went to law school because they wanted to stand for what was right. And 30 years later, these are the best litigators at the best law firms in the country, really the best law firms in the world. And they've done honorable work for their clients, major corporations, et cetera, but they've never gotten to do a case for the kingdom. We go and sit down with those people and we say, look, if we bring you everything you need, on our staff, top of their class, from Harvard, from Chicago, all the best law schools, and all they do is religious freedom. We've got a whole media division to cover you. If we bring you everything you need, are you willing to give your time and bring your firm on one of these cases? And they're like, sign me up. I've been waiting for 35 years. And you can imagine what happens when the first time in their life, all their talent, all their gifts, all their training, everything they've ever learned is for the first time lined up with the kingdom. They have never felt that before. It's kind of unfair, but we now know we have them for the rest of their lives as one of our volunteer attorneys. And they're the big partner, so they get to give permission to the younger attorneys, and they get to taste what this is like. And they're not going back. So if you were to go through the top 100 law firms in the United States, you'd find that most of those firms don't just donate their time with us. They'll fight each other over who gets to donate their time with us. And the goal I had in this was one thing, and God had a second thing. My goal was I thought we can get a lot more bang for our buck this way. It's a great way to do ministry, right? And sure enough, average case we do, every $10,000 we spend, we get $60,000 donated. It's like a 6-to-1 leveraging of God's resources. But what I didn't count on was the win-loss ratio. And that is, in the nonprofit arena, these legal groups are created to fight something big, something problematic, government, industry, something. And so if they win 40% of their cases, they're doing pretty good. Our win rate now, 23 years in a row, every single year has been above 90%. And it's because this is God's method. This is His body, right? I mean, we have the biggest law firm in the United States. It's called the Body of Christ. We can put a dream team together in any community of the country within 30 minutes that people would beg for. And all these people are going, I finally get to use my gifts. So this is a blessing for the attorneys. It's a blessing for the client who can never afford $1,000, $2,000 an hour, top of the country people. And the result is a precedent that protects everybody in the body. If that's not a circle for how the body of Christ is supposed to work, I don't know what it is. We should win 90% of our cases. The law is on our side. We have the best litigators in the country who live in those communities. If we have a case in Idaho, our attorney lives in Idaho with one of the biggest law firms in Idaho. When they go into court and look at the judge, they lost a tooth together in first grade, right? The guy who's flying in from the ACLU from Los Angeles or wherever else, he's playing an away game, okay? With the law on our side, the best talent, the best people, we should win our cases. And so normally that's where I would stop. I would say, things are going great. Yes, we've got many more cases than we used to have, many more attacks, but the model's working. But then about 5 years ago, God started moving in a dramatic way that I had never seen. And that is really things that I thought weren't possible seemed to maybe about to be happening. And really, it started with the judges. 5 years ago, we were we're nonpartisan, so we don't care if it's who's in charge. We're going to push religious freedom. And we were preparing for a Hillary Clinton presidency. And then this Donald Trump guy won. And we're like, okay, we got to reevaluate. Let's look at all the opportunities. We immediately saw 132 judicial seats that were open. These are lifetime appointments on the federal bench. Very unusual. And we felt God saying, you need to produce a vetting division to do all the research. And so we produced the best vetting division in the country to go through every single person. And I can't tell you what happened. I can't go through the 234 people and the difference of the people we just put on the court. But I'll just give you one example. This is a great example of this picture of this guy raising his hand. Top of his class, gets out, goes to work, strong Christian, goes to work at one of the biggest law firms in the country. After about 7 years, thinks, I want to do something more significant. So he goes to work for the U.S. Federal prosecutors, putting away terrorists. Wins an award for putting away terrorists. And then the new attorney general comes in and says, I'm going to move him off some of that work to work on some LGBT issues for the department. Well, he left. He's like, that's not why I went there. Well, where did he go? He came to work at First Liberty as one of our attorneys. And at age 38, he was picked to be a federal judge for the rest of his life. This is a guy who's brilliant, who would die before he would turn from the Constitution or his faith. And he's going to be the judge when my grandkids' kids walk into court. You talk about changing the future, okay? Who's the guy swearing him in? Jim Ho, probably the smartest lawyer in the country. I think he will be on the U.S. Supreme Court, evangelical Christian. And Jim was our most active volunteer attorney in the country. He's leaving a trail of fire with his opinions, the most honest and brilliant judge you probably ever see. And you start multiplying that times 234 times, and things start to change. And sure enough, things are changing. And I used to say, a few years ago, I said, I think we can change the future of the country. I'm not saying that anymore. We are changing the future of the country. Let's start with what just happened 2 months ago. 2 wins at the Supreme Court within 6 days. You might have heard about the cases. The first case is the Carson case. This is out of Maine, where they let parents, and they have for 100 years, they don't have public schools in most school districts there. They've let parents pick public or private school, whatever was best, and use their tax money towards that school. You could even pick a private school in another state if you wanted to. But then they added something. They added, but you can't pick, after almost 100 years, but you can't pick a school that teaches from a religious perspective. So they took away the choices from the parents of what was best for their kids. Well, at the Supreme Court, we won 6-3 that that's unconstitutional. And that from now on, everybody understands this part, in every school choice program, in every state, in every community of the country, you have to allow Christian schools on the same basis as every other school, right? Big victory in that sense. But it's actually much broader than that. People don't know this. They didn't base the decision on it being a school. What they said is, look, whenever there's a program, a government program that provides benefits in a generalized fashion, you can never discriminate against them on the basis of religious beliefs, religious nature, religious organization. You can never do that. Now, I want you to think of how big that is, right? Do you think that affects Teen Challenge? When you're trying to meet now, drug problems, do you think government programs can Christian groups participate? Yes, they can. Think of after Roe v. Wade being overturned, how many states are probably going to try to help with adoption? Well, can they exclude your church or your religious group from participating in that adoption program? No, they can't. This is broad. It's going to open for the church the ability to go into all these areas where they're trying to serve needs and participate fully and compete fully and show which program, which approach, which beliefs are better at changing lives and fixing people, which of course we know is through Jesus. So huge. Other case that we won 6 days later was the Coach Kennedy case. And I think a lot of people know about Coach Kennedy. Coach was a Marine for 20 years, came to be coaching, and he made a commitment to God that after every game, I'm gonna, when everybody's at the center of the field after the game, they're picking up their phone, they're making dinner reservations. The first thing I'm going to do is go to a knee and thank God for the privilege of coaching these young men. And that's what he did for 7 years. until they told him, if you go to a knee again, we're going to fire you. So what did he do? He went to a knee. He made a pledge to the Lord. And unfortunately for Coach Kennedy, he lives in the Ninth Circuit, which is, pretty hostile circuit to religious freedom. And so if you count the district court, the Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court, the back, he was 0-8 until June of this summer, where he won the one that really counted. At the Supreme Court, everybody knows now pretty much Coach Kennedy is going back to that team. He is going back to that field, and he will be taking a knee again. And most of the country's in favor of that. They're very happy about that. But that's what most people know. Now, some people realize, hey, there's never been a case at the Supreme Court, has there, on coaches and teachers and their faith and their protection in schools? There never has until this case. Okay? So that's significant too. But what people don't really realize is what happened in the decision. In this decision, there was a precedent, a case called Lemon, that goes back 50 years. It was the same court that gave us Roe v. Wade, gave us Lemon versus Kurtzman. It's called the Lemon test. And it's what's led to this government hostility to religion our whole lives, right? Nativity scenes under attack, 10 Commandments under attack, any religion in public, religion in schools, any of this stuff under attack. Why? Because the Constitution says you can't do these things? No. Founders would be appalled at this because of this case called Lemon. Well, I'm sitting with Coach Kennedy as the decision comes down, and he's like, did I win? And we go, yeah, you won. Shh, we're reading the opinion, And we get through there, and we come up, and they say, Lemon is gone. I can't describe to you what this means. And I'll step back and be real honest. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, can you get rid of Lemon in your lifetime? I would have said no. No, it's been cited 7,000 times. Okay, it's been followed for 50 years. There's no way. I can chip away. That's what I can do. And so, but 3 years ago, we had this case, the Bladensburg Cross case. This is a memorial. You can see in the corner of that memorial. It was put up 100 years ago by mothers who lost their sons in World War I, until the American humanists came along 10 years ago and said, hey, you can't have this monument. It's a cross. And the Federal Court of Appeals said, why don't we just cut the arms off the cross? That way nobody will be offended and we don't have to tear it down. So they ruled 2-1 unconstitutional after 100 years. So we went to the Supreme Court and we said, we could argue just to protect this memorial, but we're looking at the court and we see Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh donated his time with me as a young lawyer on religious liberty cases. We're seeing Gorsuch, who we knew is real strong on religious liberty, and we went, maybe we can go after this Lemon case. And so we did. And the decision was 7-2, upholding the memorial. We won. But more importantly, 5-4, they refused to follow Lemon. It was a crack in the armor. They didn't overturn it, but they refused to follow it. So I sat down with our staff and I said, look, this is a great victory, but we have got to drag this into the schools where kids are being affected and coaches and teachers and everybody else. We have got to drag this across our society, but that's going to take us 10 or 15 years because, this has been here for a long time. There's all these citations. So when we argued the Coach Kennedy case, this was a big enough case without trying to go for the grand slam and get rid of Lemon. So we thought that's irresponsible to go for something really big and lose the case, so we didn't. Midway through the oral argument, out of nowhere, all of a sudden, Kavanaugh and Gorsuch start talking about, you know what, maybe it's time that we get rid of Lemon. And our eyes are like as big as silver dollars. We're like, no way are they talking about this. And we thought, but maybe they're just trying to move the discussion for the future. And then that opinion comes down, Lemon is dead. The dissent's going crazy. People don't understand what just happened. This is the biggest religious freedom change in our lifetime. There's no bigger case that's been handed down on religious freedom in the last 70 years. Everything just changed. 7,000 citations overruled. Okay? Everywhere a cross went down, the cross now goes back up. Everywhere that prayer was taken out, prayer goes back in. And so we're literally creating a project that we're going to release in a few weeks called Restoring Faith in America, where we're going to let the grassroots go into each of their communities. We're going to have a packet for them where they can go in and say, I want the monument back up. I want the prayer back in the school board. I want these kids. All of that can be changed. Okay? Over 7,000 citations, all overturned. We're already seeing it with football games. We're getting pictures of kids after games, both teams and coaches gathering together and praying. And people are seeing those pictures and they're going, we're going to do that in our community. We're going to bring back our country. And so this is the most exciting thing I've seen, because this is about going on offense, not sitting back and reacting to the attacks. This is, we're bringing the attack. We're bringing the gospel all over the country. So I wanted to set that stage for you, because I'm going to get to the specifics of the workplace, but I wanted you to realize what's happening is really unusual and really positive. God is moving in a dramatic... Every American alive right now, whether they know it or not, has more religious freedom than they've ever had in their lifetime. And we're just at the beginning of this, okay? We're just at the beginning. And so as I say that, and I go into the workplace, we have two cases sitting at... The court comes into session this Monday. First Monday in October is when they start each year. They've been on break all summer. And when they come back, we have, if you were to ask me 5 years ago, what cases would you like to get rid of if you could just wave a wand? The Lemon case would be number one. Number two would be the Smith case. And number three would be TWA versus Hardison. Both of the cases I'm about to tell you about, if they grant and rule, will throw out Smith and will throw out TWA versus Hardison. What's the first one? It's the Klein case. These are the bakers from Oregon who just wanted to have a bakery. And they had a gay couple come in and they served them. They loved on them. But then they said, we want you to do a custom wedding cake and say things about our wedding that they weren't going to say. They're like, oh, we're sorry. As Christians, we just can't do that. But we'll refer you to somebody who'll do a great job. Next thing they know, the state was coming after them. They were fined $135,000. Their business was bankrupted. They were ordered not to speak publicly their beliefs about marriage. We had to go, this is the Oregon courts, not very friendly. We had to go all the way up to the Supreme Court. 9-0, they vacated the decision, sent it back down, and said, why don't you do this again? Well, they said, oh, they realized, oops. So they said, yeah, we did engage in religious discrimination. This panel did. So we're going to wipe out the fines and send it back down to the same discriminatory group and let them try it again. Well, guess what they did? They came up with another fine. So we're now back up at the Supreme Court. I think we got a quick video where you can see the Kleins and just a little feel for what they're going through.
Melissa loves creating custom cakes. She loves serving people even more.
Of course, I want to do my baked goods and cupcakes and cakes and all the sweets. A place where anybody can come and sit down and, feel welcomed, and I want to get to know everybody.
But 10 years ago, a cake they could not make brought Aaron and Melissa Klein's thriving family business to a painful end.
We were asked to do a same-sex wedding cake, and we politely declined to do so because of our faith.
It wasn't actually a hard decision. We try to live by the Bible. We try to live by God's Word, do everything that it says in it. And in this situation, marriage has always been between a man and a woman for us.
Now, the customers went elsewhere and got their cake, and that should have been the end of the story. But a hostile state agency set out to destroy Aaron and Melissa's business.
It was super shocking to be hit with a $135,000 damage award.
There was nothing more frustrating than watching a state government operate in the way in which Oregon operates, and that is the government becomes untouchable. The government becomes all-powerful.
Activists saw what the state did and took it even further.
Like, we had people protest us, we had people boycotting us, we had people out there just saying horrible things, getting horrible emails.
Something like 6,400 emails, just nasty emails.
People writing messages on our vehicle.
People threatening us, to hoping our kids die, to hoping that we ourselves die.
And then my vendors started boycotting me, which absolutely crushed me.
We had kids that we pulled out of school and started homeschooling. We sheltered them a bit more from some of the stuff that goes on in the world.
I would have to just reach out to God and say, okay, you gotta give me a shield or something, because I can't take this.
We are looking for a full victory for Aaron and Melissa Klein at the United States Supreme Court.
First Liberty Institute stepped in to help the Kleins.
Well, the Kleins are such genuine, wonderful people their faith and their courage and their strength really comes out whenever you meet them. And so we're really fighting for them and for everyone like them to be able to live with integrity, to work with integrity, to not be forced to violate your religious beliefs.
For the sake of their family, Aaron and Melissa escaped Oregon to start a new life in Montana while the case continues.
We just needed to be in a place that valued freedom.
I trust the Lord so much more now than I ever did back then. God's in control. God's got this.
3 weeks ago, we filed their case in the U.S. Supreme Court. And you saw they've moved to Montana. They've actually opened their bakery in Montana. But we can still pursue the Oregon litigation because there's a fine against them, which is perfect for us. So they can't make it go away. And this is the huge battle. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what the law is, but the one area that's a little murky right now is because of this Bostock decision at the Supreme Court, where it redefined the word sex in the law to mean not male-female. You can't discriminate in the workplace on that, but transgender and sexual orientation, which is not what the law when it was passed in 1964 meant. It's a bad decision. But if you read that decision, Gorsuch was the deciding vote. And in the decision, gratuitously, out of nowhere, he adds 2 paragraphs. And he says, by the way, I want to note that there are no religious claims in this case. If there were, those would be interests, quote, of the highest order, protected, and he starts citing the Constitution and all these things. I think it's very clear that when we get this issue to the Supreme Court and get it decided, that they're not going to allow LGBT to trump religious freedom, which is in the Constitution. But we've got to get that there. Until we do, this is going to be up in the air, and people are going to be scared, and people are going to be intimidated. And this, if they take this case, this will be the case to do that. It will overturn the Smith decision. It will make clear that religious freedom allows people to run their business according to their faith, and that these type of attacks will not work. So it's an important case. Pray for the Kleins. Pray for this case. And so that's for Christian employers. So that's for Christian employers. Christian employees, the big case is the Groff case. We've got this at the Supreme Court. And I won't go through all the details. I think we got a picture of Gerald. But Gerald is a guy who was a missionary, came back, wanted to work, but his Sabbath's very important to him. He came back from the missionary field. So he thought to have Sundays off, he'd go work at the U.S. Postal Service. And then they started, he was fine with that until they started delivering on Sunday with Amazon. But they gave him, he had a right to religious accommodation under the law, and they gave him that. And then a new postmaster came in and said, we're not giving him anything. And they fired him. And his case is setting up, it's a beautiful case, because what happened is 25 years ago, the Supreme Court, again, back when we had a bad Supreme Court, reinterpreted the federal law in ways that were bizarre. They read words into the statute that were not there, that made the protection for people in the workplace from these woke corporations, it made the protection really small. And so this sets up that case. It's called TWA versus Hardison. And normally what we do is, if you're going to the Supreme Court, you try to get around these big precedents. You say, well, that really doesn't apply here, whatever. Our approach on this case, because 5 justices in separate places have said, we need to reconsider this TWA versus Hardison. Our appeal to the Supreme Court was, this case was wrong. It was applied against Gerald Groff. You need to overturn this case. So we're laying it right in their lap. And if they do, it will dramatically increase the protection of every believer at every one of these woke corporations at a key time when that's a real battle right now. So if you look at these 2 cases, Christian employers, Christian employees, both these cases are now sitting before the Supreme Court. Be praying and be watching. All right, so let me tell you some, because it doesn't take a lot of time to tell you about the law, the federal law, Title VII, and the state law, which usually mirrors that. It's kind of simple. Employees have a right not to be religiously discriminated against. Not a shocker, right? So you can't say, oh, you're not hired here, you're fired here, you don't get the promotion because I don't like your religious beliefs. You can't do that. It violates Title VII, assuming you have 15 or more employees. And sometimes in the States, it's less than that. Additionally, there's an additional prong which says not only that, but if you can reasonably accommodate the beliefs of your employees, then you have to as a matter of law. And so typically that's been like a Sabbath case, like Orthodox Jews or Seventh-day Adventists that, from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, they can't work. And the question is, can you change the schedules around to make it work? And usually you can. So there's no reason to force people out of their job. And so if you can do a reasonable accommodation, you're supposed to. So that's the law on the employee side. But on the employer side, there's also religious freedom, which is, of course, the Hobby Lobby case, well-known case. Hobby Lobby had a right to follow their faith with how they did things with their business. And that's protected both under federal law and under the United States Constitution, under the Free Exercise Clause. So really, the only thing, well, let me put it this way. It's the perfect situation. Employees get religious freedom and employers get religious freedom. The only thing a Christian employer can't do is something no Christian employer would want to do, which is coerce people or punish them because they won't follow their faith. Oh, you're coming to church with me or you're fired. I mean, that's not exactly a Christian approach in the workplace, right? So this is really good news because the opportunities are endless for what you can do. Can you have a Bible study? Absolutely, you can have a Bible study as long as it's voluntary. Okay? Can you have chaplains? Yeah, you can have chaplains. I mean, there's endless things you can do, and that's really the challenge I would give you is your creativity. Think of how much creativity, effort, prayer you've put to figuring out how to make your business work or work better or solve problems. Have you spent, 5% of that time on how you can make your business work to spiritually impact people's lives? Have you been creative in that way? Had a team of people maybe even at your work who were like you, who could brainstorm, who could do things? And I'll just give you an example. I've seen lots of great examples, and God will show you stuff. There was a group I went and spoke to a number of years ago called Laborers in the Field of Education. And I was like, well, what do you guys, I spoke about religious freedom, and I said, what are you guys doing? It was a guy who was an administrator in a school, and his wife who had just retired as a teacher, and they decided to start this ministry. And what they did is tried to reach educators for Christ, because they said this will affect all the kids if we can reach the educators too. And so they did lots of brainstorming, and they had a list of 100 ideas of things you could do in the workplace. One was put a box in the teacher's lounge and just say, if you have prayer requests, put your prayer requests in here and we will pray for you. This group that they had created. And you know what? People would do that. People would pray for them. People would then meet with them and say, we're praying for you. And eventually they'd have a little gathering where they'd have a speaker, and some people would come to know the Lord. And in the 2 years since they started, when I was there, and they were in 2 school districts, over 1,200 educators came to Christ because of their just creative ideas that they laid out. So it's endless what you can do. And so I would just say to you, the law, I would summarize it this way. Employers have religious freedom. You can have things in your mission statement. You have religious freedom. Employees have religious freedom. And the one murky area is this area of, sex and sexual orientation and all that. I think we're going to win this area. Maybe it'll be real soon, but I would predict within the next 5 years, we're going to win that case at the Supreme Court. By what I see on the Supreme Court. In the meantime, that's the only area where people have to kind of manage, and we're helping lots of people manage that. And in fact, we've won all those cases so far. But what you can do and what the Lord would call you to do affirmatively is totally protected. And that's just so rare. I think we take this for granted. We don't have any guarantee that we're going to keep these freedoms. But right now we got them. So we need to exercise them. So my challenge to you is go, get together, fast, pray, think, let God show you how to do this. But you have all kinds of protection and freedom as long as you don't punish people for not following your faith, again, which is not something Christians do. So don't be intimidated, don't be fearful, because the law is actually on your side. It actually protects you, just like it protected Hobby Lobby, all the way up to the Supreme Court. And so I just want you to be encouraged that. And I want you to show you something. I think we've got a picture of the brochure. We're coming out with a brochure. It'll probably be out in the next couple of weeks. This is a protection kit for people who are running for-profit businesses who are people of faith. Okay? It's going to lay out what the law says, what you can do, and it's even going to have a deal at the back of sample language you could use to put into your documents to provide further protection for yourself. So it'll have all that. And so I know a number of people in here probably already get our information. If you don't, there's two ways. I think there's a card on the table. There's also Don Spack's here somewhere. Where are you, Don? Don's in the very back. Don will be here the whole time. He's a FCCI member himself. But he'll also be at the table. You can fill out a card and just write on the top, I want the new brochure. Or this, now some of you think, hey, do I stare at this and see if I see a picture of Jesus eventually? No, it's a QR code, okay? It's a QR code. So you pick up your phone, you point the camera at it, just like in COVID with the menus, right? You do your camera in it, it'll pop up a link where you can fill out, and if you fill out that link, we will make sure, number one, we'll get you on the list. And I would encourage people, if you're not on the list, whether you sign up a card or do this, you might not hear about what happens if you're not on our list, you know? You might, like a lot of people know Coach Kennedy one, almost nobody knows what it really means, okay? So you need to follow these cases with regard to religion in the workplace, and this is a way to do that. And so, but if you'll do this on the code or write on the card, and if you're already on the list, just pull out a card and give it to Don and say, hey, here's my name, I'd like one of the brochures, and we will send it to you as soon as it's out, probably in the next couple of weeks or so. But I just want to thank you. Oh, and by the way, I was going to be on a panel this afternoon, but I've got to speak in California tomorrow, and so I'm on an earlier flight in order to get out because of what's going on. So I won't be able, but I'm happy to answer questions until I leave. But just, I guess, the biggest thing of all is if you have issues, all these things are different. The facts are different. Things change. Our brochures and things are just to help you understand the basics. Call us, okay? We're free. We're confidential. You can just call us. We'll walk through with you. We have very experienced litigators who deal with this all the time, and we want to help you be as productive for the Lord as you can be. So just see us as a resource, and we're happy to work with you, your attorneys, whoever, to help you be what God's calling you to be. God bless you.